Welcome, everybody, to Chronicles of a Dallas County Democrat. I am your host, AZ Zion. In this podcast, we interview local activists and see how they got to where they are today. And in today's episode, we have Mathis Perkins, Democratic Precinct Chair in Oak Cliff. Mathis, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
All right, Mathis. So why don't you introduce yourself and share a little bit about yourself with the audience?
Okay, I'm Mathis Perkins, and I am on the cusp of being a septuagenarian. I turned 69 this upcoming May. Married for 36 years, 4 adult independent children, Marine Corps veteran, disabled veteran, and longtime resident of Oak Cliff. And I love Oak Cliff. I've lived in other parts of the country, and I've lived in other parts of the Metroplex, and more affluent parts of the Metroplex, more comfortable parts of the Metroplex. But my heart is in Oak Cliff and with this community.
So let's talk a little bit about Oak Cliff. I think this is a good starting point. Describe to people who have never been to Oak Cliff, what it is about your community that you love, and how was it growing up?
I have lived on this street, um, well, been on this street since 1960. So that gives me 66 years of being on this street. I was raised in a house 2 blocks from here. And our backyard ran off into a creek, and I lived one house from a creek, and that had its own adventures. We had a sloping hill on one side of our yard and these magnificent trees, which as a boy, that's, hey, it doesn't get any better than that. And we had it was just a neighborhood, and there were a lot of kids, our kid that were the age of me and my siblings. So I do have some fond memories, and it might even go to the extent of even being unrealistic, but it was paradise for me. And what ties my heart to Oak Cliff? It's sort of a natural place. uh, the trees, the hills, the vegetation, all of it is, from probably pre-turn of the century, pre 1900, really. So when you go to some other places that were made up, uh, and not that some of those places aren't beautiful, but you see the little new growth trees in a row, and I'm not disparaging new growth trees. We need to have that. But you see where they're trying to make a beauty, where Oak Cliff, you just naturally get there and you relax and exhale and like, oh, this is like living in a park or something like that.
Southern Dallas in general is beautiful, as you mentioned, and especially in your neighborhood, in your community. You mentioned you lived in other areas before. Kind of compare and contrast some of those areas.
Well, when I immediately graduated from undergrad, I, followed the crowd, and I moved into what was then the place to be. And there was a company that had their homes, and they were building them. And it was a good thing to say, you could just say, hey, look, I live in this brand home, but I live in this this community. And that was Plano at the time. And it was a Fox and Jacobs home too at that time. And I don't even know if they're still in business. And it was at Alma and Parker. And that was the furthest north you could be at that time. This was around 78, 79, so around there. So, and I loved it. And later on, I moved back over here. Well, actually, from there, uh, I moved to Houston and found an opportunity, New Orleans to law school, and to other cities following opportunities. And I came back here finally, and because I came back once in 19 around 1990, and then I left again for San Antonio in California, and I've resided here since roughly 90. Whoa, probably 98, 98.
Now, what I'm sensing is you could have had the opportunity to live anywhere else, but you chose where you grew up. Was it a sense of community service? What got you back to where you live now?
Okay, and I do have a sister that lives in Frisco, and I have a sister that lives in Union Park. And what was when she moved out there was Aubrey, but now it got annexed by Little Elm. And a sister lives in Garland. And they are always at me, come on, move out here where you be close to us. Ah, la, 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 la. Yeah. And yes, I could live there in those places. And I do like the comfort, and I would like the comfort for my wife. But this sort of goes back to something that was ingrained in me with my parents, and they had a love of community. My mother had a love of community. She got me involved in the neighborhood association and in the voting process. And not to try to proselytize anybody, but I'm here. My spirit tells me I'm here to help the people who are ailing. I'm not here to help the people who are doing well. And if you're already doing well, yeah, I'd love to just sit there by the pool and do well with you. But it fulfills my spirit to help people who need my help, who need the kind of help I can offer.
Now, you said you met your parents kind of instilled those values in you. Did they instill those values in you at a young age? You and your siblings as well.
Yes, they did. They all of their and there are seven of us, and all of us are public interest active. I have a sister, PhD, and she's in education. Refuses to retire, and I don't know why. She could make more money in retirement than she does at work. Another sister that was a in the public sector as an attorney, and she's community oriented, though she's not as active as she had been in the past. Though she still fills my ear with her point of view and that kind of thing. Uh, Other sister that lives in Connecticut, and again, she's civically and socially active. So we were all raised to be civically and socially active.
What did your parents do? Do you remember early memories of your parents out and about?
Well, my father was the prototypical provider. He provided for us to the extent that we were economically sort of ignorant when we reached adulthood because we didn't know about bills. We didn't know about debt. We didn't know any of those things because it was all taken care of. And that wasn't something that they spent time talking to us about. And my mother was the consummate trainer, uh, protector, because she was like a cross between a pit bull, Rottweiler, and Doberman. If you crossed her across any of the Perkins kids, you got the attack, and it wasn't pleasant. It was the same way when we crossed and did things that were we shouldn't have done. We got the attack, and it wasn't pleasant. So, and the other thing is, we were all raised not to just be products of our community. We were raised to be at the front of the pack. I thought as a kid that everybody did everything that we did, and because we went to movies, museums, trips, this, that, other. And I thought when I left home, other people left home, but they just went different directions. And that turned out not to be the truth. And I really didn't find that out until I was well into adulthood when I was speaking with one of my childhood friends, and he said, "Oh, you guys were rich because y'all did this, y'all did that." I said, "I thought everybody did that, but everybody didn't do that." And that is, part of the uniqueness of us, but not to sort of brag, but she exposed us to a lot of things and made it where we were comfortable doing things that weren't just, neighborhood.
Did you ever eventually, maybe when you were kids or into your adulthood, did you ever have a conversation with your parents about that kind of upbringing, how they brought you guys up to be involved in your communities as opposed to, most of your friends in your childhood?
No, we never had that kind of conversation, and we didn't have that type of relationship, so to speak. We were shown the way to go, and we knew the way to go. And if we followed that way, it was fine. If we didn't follow that way, there were consequences, and we didn't want the consequences, so we followed that way. And there was harmony even as young adults when we were still following that way, and because there was never a question in my mind of whether I was going to go to college. I never thought of it. And and I didn't. I'm not saying that I knew because my parents weren't highly educated. My father dropped out of school in the 8th grade. My mother dropped out in the 10th grade. She later on got a GED and became a nurse. But they weren't highly educated, but they pushed education to us. And we knew that we weren't going to go to high school and get out and get a job in retail and live a life. We knew we were destined for much more, and we did much more. And that's what we pursued.
When did you know you wanted to join the military? Is all the service that your parents instilled, did that kind of get you to join the military?
Joining the military was actually an economic decision. And it had nothing to do with patriotism, though as a youth, I've always been a sort of a straight laced, let's follow the rules, let's color within the lines type of person. Uh, but I had two older sisters, and remember, my parents were laborers, and at that time, my mother wasn't a nurse. But even had she been, there was limited resources. And I'm the third of seven children. I have two older sisters, three younger sisters, and a younger brother. And at the time that I graduated high school, they didn't have two nickels to rub together for me to go to college because they were already invested in my two older sisters. And I felt, well, what can I do to pursue this? And to the benefit of it, and it wasn't that I came up with the idea myself. I was involved in a program that the city of Dallas had that was a product of City of Dallas, the Dallas College and District, and the DISD, and it was called Daltex back then. And if you were 14 years old or older, you got a summer job. And if you had completed your junior year, you not only got a summer job, but you got to go to what we call community college back then for free for 6 hours a term. So you could take four classes during the summer. And this was after my senior year, and I was in the Daltex program, so I could get a little money. And there were people who attended school with us. I was in Mountain View at the time, and they happened to be veterans, and they had nice cars and were living comfortably. And I thought I wanted to have a nice car. I want to live comfortably and go to school. And I said, well, and they were veterans. So I said, well, I'll be a veteran. Now these guys were Army veterans, and I always thought myself better than other people. So I went to the Marine Corps to do the hardest thing I could do. And so I joined the Marine Corps on June 20th of 1975. And it was the significance of that is, even though they hadn't fought in Vietnam in 2 years, it the official, the administrative end, Department of Defense end of Vietnam was June 30th of 1975. And what that did for me, it makes me even though I was only in for 10 days on paper, it makes me a Vietnam era veteran, which has other benefits and stuff like that, which I am taking advantage of through today.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Talk about your Marine career.
Because I was raised by my mother's name is Maxine, and she could have her own drill instructor school because everything had to be exact and in place. And when you have a household that's three bedrooms, one bathroom, and nine people, you can't have, every gear has to work. You can't have grinding. And so we learned how at home, how everything was in place. So going into the Marine Corps was actually not gonna say it's a vacation, but it was like, oh, do this, learn that, do this. You know, I was very schooled in that. So much so that I was in contention to be the honor grad out of boot camp. I didn't be I wasn't the honor grad, and it had the implications of me not being the honor grad were not so much based on my performance, but based on the politics at the time. It looked better to have someone other than an African American from Dallas be the honor grad, and that's what they did. But I did get meritoriously promoted. The difference in the honor grad and the because you get meritoriously promoted as well. But the difference is the honor grad gets to choose their duty station. I didn't get to choose my duty station, but everything worked out well. I started out as what's called an infantry marksman, and a marksman is a guy you have this tube, and it shoots things up to 5 miles away. 3 miles for the one that I worked on, and that lasted maybe 3 months. And then they put me in this other school, uh, nuclear, chemical, biological warfare and defense school, where we learned all the things about that type of warfare. And I had the responsibility of preparing and protecting a company and a battalion if we were, a battalion's about 1,200 people, 800 to 1,200 people. If we were attacked by chemical warfare, radiological warfare, biological warfare, and that type of thing. And did that uh, for 3 years. And then after 3 years of active duty, and I knew I wanted to keep a little change coming in my pocket. Again, this is monetary stuff. So I stayed in the reserves when I got off of active duty and went to undergrad. That way I kept a check coming in. And there I was a avionics tech. I worked in the electric shop in which we did the autopilot and other electronics on planes. And I was the uh, head non-commissioned officer, ATNOIC, in the electronic avionics shop. And left the military in '84, and I was the rank of a staff sergeant, E6. And I left because I've got a very lucrative job in Houston, Texas. And I'm maybe 26 years old at that time. And I tried to do both for a while. And I was living so good in Houston, and I actually sort of immature in a way, if I really must be honest. That I said, look, I'm making so much money. I don't need to fool with these people. Let it go. And that's more time I could spend doing young people things in Houston, which is what I did.
Let's drill down into your nuclear and chemical warfare training. I don't know if that's the correct terminology, but did you choose that arena, or did it choose you in a way?
In the military, they look at your aptitude. And I had a ASVAB score that was off the charts. And I was very tied up, squared away Marine. And when you're like that, the unit gets points for putting people in those schools. And so it was beneficial for the unit to have a candidate that could go into school like that. And it was beneficial for me to be able to go into a school like that. So it wasn't so much that I chose it, it was that they said, hey, you're going to NBC school. Okay. And that's what you do.
Did you learn anything from that time that you kind of saw later on in your life when it comes to how the world operates when it comes to war?
Learned a lot of things because later on, like during Iraq, when they use gas, and when you hear about people using gas on their own people or using, this, not just chemicals, but actually using bombs. Because at that point, we didn't have the GPS that we have now, but I learned a method of I could call in an airstrike on just the size of my screen, just to, and that was one of the things we learned how to, the longitude and latitude down to the nth degree where you don't miss. So when I hear of things that where people say they missed their target, and remember we didn't have GPS and satellite guidance and stuff then. I'm like, okay, that makes me wonder what they went through, what they were doing, and it also gave me an insight on what chemical warfare could be and what it does and those types of things like that, and why it's something that we don't want to happen. And also, when we talk about, like when they talked about weapons of mass destruction, I didn't hear things. I mean, the public heard WMDs, but I needed to hear something a little different than WMDs because what are we talking about? And the same way in and with this recent thing that they're doing with Iran and saying that Iran has uranium. Well, Iran has had uranium since 1980, and I'm not going to get into the president who was a president in 1980, but he was very popular, and he was the one that authorized for the United States to give Iran the uranium for the purposes of developing an energy system. And of course, the Shah of Iran was our friend at that time. So this thing of Iran and uranium is as a underlying reason to, take military action. Okay, you know, it sells well. It sounds well in the media. It does, but we gave them the uranium.
Now you said if I understood you correctly, you said you pick up on things when you hear or see the news at night. You pick up on things that perhaps the average person doesn't pick up on. Is that because of your experience in the military? What do you pick up on specifically, or is it just a more general historical trend?
No, that goes back to my military training because we were trained in, for just a basic military training. We were trained in weaponry, period. And the going beyond that in the nuclear, chemical, biological sphere, we were trained in what chemical weapons could do and would do, and why they're not good to use because you can't control them, and why radioactive weapons aren't good to use because you can't control them. In fact, because of what we did, and not just in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the testing that we did and the in other countries did in developing their nuclear programs. There's nuclear radiation in the air, or not just in the atmosphere and the environment that wasn't present pre 1940, and that has an adverse impact on all of us. We don't, it's not something we talk about, but it does have an adverse impact on the whole ecosystem, vegetation, animals, everything.
So your training in chemical warfare and nuclear, did that kind of translate into your career right after that as an avionics tech? How did you choose that one?
Again, I didn't do a lot of choosing uh, based on what I'd been through. Um, the NBC uh, background, nuclear, chemical, biological warfare background, put me in headquarters, and it also, and when you're in headquarters, you get promoted faster than people that are just in the units. So that worked for me. And when I uh, left active duty and came to Dallas, I had a choice of two units that I could be a part of. And one was a Marine Corps Reserve artillery unit, which that's a ground unit. And the other was a air wing unit. It was called F4 Squadron, F4 jets, which were the jets for Vietnam. They don't use F4s anymore, except for air shows. And uh, this is my off-duty experience. When I was in Okinawa, Japan, as well as when I served at other duty stations. Whenever you went to in the Marine Corps, they called it an air wing base or or going to the Naval Air Station, or going to an Air Force base, things were so much nicer. So you knew that you wanted to be attached to something that had to do with flying if you wanted to have the best service experience. So when I got to learn what the units that were here, of course I was going to take the an aviation unit over an infantry unit because life was better in an aviation unit, and that's what made led to my choice in being in aviation and avionics. And also, when I was back in high school, I took an electronics cluster, so I was sort of predisposed to electronics and that kind of thing. So it was a good fit.
Sure, sure. So what did you do after your duty in the military?
Well, I received a what was broadcast film arts, Bachelor of Fine Arts degree uh, in '81, and I chose not to sort of just to go into that because the route was the internship route, and it was a lot of dog labor, and I'm like, I'm not trying. I've been in the military. I'm not trying to do dog labor. Well, I got into communication, and that took me to communication and marketing, and that took me to lucrative jobs. And one was out of Houston, where I had the region of I had Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston. Those were the markets back then that I serviced, and it was it was nice, and that expanded to be servicing uh, the southeast quadrant of the United States. And I say southeast, but it extended down from DC to Florida, all the way to Texas, and all the states in between. So
When did your sort of political activism kick in?
when I turned 18 and was able to vote for the first time,
So you
and
turned 18. Who was the first person you ever voted for?
that would have been 1976. And I don't know who was the president. Reagan got
Carter.
in '80. Carter, yes, Carter. Reagan got in '80, so yeah, Carter was the first president I voted for.
Did you try to kind of get your friends and your schoolmates, whatever, politically active as well, or not really?
Uh, no, because that was in November of '76, and I was actually in boot camp when I voted. So it was the drill instructor came out in drill instructor lingo and said, all of you people, and that's a kind term, are going to vote. He didn't tell us how we are going to vote. He chose we are going to vote. And this is where you're from. And they had all of the little things we need to fill out to vote absentee ballot. So we mail those in, and we got our absentee ballot, and we filled them out, and that's how we voted.
Now, I met you as a precinct chair a couple of years ago, and I still remember the day me and you sat down next to each other in a park in your neighborhood, and you mapped out Oak Cliff for me. So I learned so much, and I still appreciate it to this day. Um, were was the sort of I don't want to make this sound any sort of way, but like an official position with the Democratic Party, that's like the precinct chair position. Were you kind of politically involved in other active areas as well before that?
Well, not so much politics per se, but I had been a volunteer on different candidates' campaigns, the state rep, city council people, state senator, school board, those types of things. And that preceded actually being a precinct chair. And was a deputy voter registrar for a long time, still am, and worked as a poll worker and worked as an election judge. And I think at the time that you and I met, I was working on the ballot board, which I'm on sabbatical from the ballot board right now, but I expect I will return in November and be do more ballot board duty.
Now that's electoral politics. Were you also involved in other areas that were not politics per se?
The very involved in neighborhood associations,
Hmm.
to the point where I was helped get a grant for our neighborhood that we did a nice mural, and it still stands today, and did many community beautification projects, not just only in my immediate neighborhood, but in helping other people. And there's tree plants at nauseum, cleanups at nauseum, and neighborhood, like I said, neighborhood association meetings, code enforcement, code crawls, all of that type of thing, crime prevention.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that the sort of stuff that you instill in your family right now as well?
Now, because of my advancing age, and I'm not saying that I can't do it, but I have diminished the my activity role more to an advisory role where I could have a broader impact with the amount of effort that I put in, and I enjoy that. And there are times when I actually do pick up the little uh, thongs that you use to pick up trash with and do other things. There are times when I do that. And you and I, well, have actually did the neighborhood walks, where we went and knocked on doors, door knocking campaigns. I've actually did that as well.
Uh-huh. For sure. What was some of your proudest moments when, as part of your neighborhood association, what was some of the, I suppose, challenges that people should perhaps watch out for in their own associations?
Well, and I would say this with the neighborhood associations and even with the political process of working with the county party and working as a precinct chair or a deputy voter registrar, as a poll worker or election judge, or even at the ballot board. Uh, you may see and have an idea of what would solve a problem or what is desired, but the path to that solution is not a straight path. And that path is going to have setbacks, and it's going to have detours, and it's going to have pitfalls. But know that going in, and know that, so that when you encounter them, know that that's just part of the process, so that you don't encounter it and then just throw up your hands and say it's not worth it. No, this is, know that going in, that you're gonna it's not gonna be easy. And it's not gonna be point A to point B, just a beeline. It life doesn't happen that way. So know you're gonna encounter pushback, and just be ready for the pushback, and say this is part of it. Great. Do what you need to do to, you know, accept, embrace that point and move forward, and go on with it, because the rewards at the end are great.
So, in all your years doing this, neighborhood association, county party, even the military, um, how do we prepare ourselves for the potential setbacks, and how do we prevent the throwing the hands up in the air and saying it's not worth it?
The first way I would do it, and is to listen to programs like this, where you are exposed to people that have information, knowledge, and experience of having done it, and learn from their experience. Because when you sort of have a blueprint of how things go, you're not surprised by them. And when you're surprised by something, it has 10 times the impact that it would if you were expecting it. That would be step one. Step two, I would get as much information as I could on what I'm trying to achieve. Because with information and knowledge, that's power. And when you have the information, the knowledge. You are more invested into the results you're going to get as a result of your efforts. If you're sort of going on something just on a like and you really don't have the knowledge of it, then when a flat tire occurs, you're like, oh, I'm not trying to fix a flat tire. I'm out. So I would suggest getting knowledge. And on the third thing, and this is something that doesn't come from outside, but comes from inside. And that's just know that I'm not doing this to get my toe in the water. I'm not doing this to, get a little spray on my face. I'm not trying to be a gold star grabber or attention getter. I'm doing this to build a bridge to the other side. And you have that commitment inside you before you start. And then you won't, you got the commitment that you start with, you got the knowledge that outweighs the pushback and other things that happen. And you've seen and listened to other people who have done it and you've got their stories. So that would arm you with the ability to weather basically anything that you encounter in trying to accomplish whatever your goals seem to be. It's particularly when there are setbacks and shortfalls.
How has society or our culture, or has society or our culture changed since the time you were growing up, in how we sort of approach problems and try to solve them and communicate with one another?
Well, and I'm just going to say this in electronic terms. When I was a child, the only way you could heat something or cook something was on a stove or an oven. And then they did have the little hot plates and the toaster ovens, but still, it just required heat. So you had a granular, holistic approach to everything. It had to be done in this base way. Well, society changed and we invented the microwave. It didn't take as long. And so not only could we microwave our processed food, because we moved from the whole foods that we ate, that we cooked in the oven, to the processed foods that we could freeze and cook in the microwave. And we did that with the way that we operated. We went from learning and knowing stuff for ourselves to accepting processed ideas that we could microwave and give to others. And now we are in what I would refer to as a clickbait society, and things are done on the basis of how many eyes they can get. And we are given the pablum that they feed us is, oh, this had the highest clickbait, so therefore it must be true. And no, if you show a man with his hair on fire and he's running and he happens to say something, that doesn't make it true. His hair is on fire and he's running and he's, trying to, and so that's what we get a lot of, of, of microwave clickbait in the moment without the whole picture of consequence decisions. And we act on that. And that's sort of, it's not anything new. Human nature is to take the path of least resistance. And if my information is a mouse click or a tap on my phone, then, oh, okay. And I'm going with that as knowledge and information when it really isn't. So overcoming human nature it's been a task since there's been people. It's just that right now with the clickbait microwave society, people can get led, uh, I'm not going to say led astray, but led to that easiest path, that broadest path, which most times is not in their best interest. A lot easier.
I agree with you 100% on the fundamental aspect of it when it comes to human nature. We do want the path of least resistance. We were never meant to do any of what we're doing right now. Um, My generation, me, we came of age, I guess, in the social media generation. So for me, it's like, well, social media, it kind of changed something fundamentally about how we treat each other. But you're saying it actually came before that. Automation, microwaving, in your terms, has been around way longer than that. How has the sort of automation making things easier, how has that manifested itself into society and into your community?
Time is a constant. Everybody has the same amount of time, and that hasn't changed since the beginning of time. But what we can do in that time has changed. If I were going, I'm in Texas. If I were going from Texas to California a couple of hundred years ago, there was a probably a 20-25% mortality rate that I would make it, and it would take 3 months. If I'm going to California right now, and just say I'm not trying to break a speed record, but I'm resting along the way, I could be in Los Angeles in 30 hours. And that includes, a couple of nights at hotels. So we have the ability to travel greater distances and to communicate over greater distances. You and I are not even in the same place, but we're on the same screen. So we have things that we can do in less time, which gives us more time. And what do we choose to do with the more time that we have? And knowing human nature, there are people who would, read more or do this more. But if we look at the facts that are out there right now, more people are spending time on social media sites and on their phones. And they're looking, at TikTok to get, look at funny videos there or funny stuff on Facebook or stuff that meets their satisfies their interest. So much so that the main thing that was a communication vehicle when I was coming up was television. Now, when I was born, there was television from basically 5 or 6 in the morning to 10 at night, and maybe up to on weekends, maybe to midnight. And not only that, but there were only 5 or 6 channels per market. That even included New York. So you had this very small media tube that you got to see where you showed the rest of the world in. Now, the beauty of today, and there is so much information, and all of it's not bad, that you can get via social media. Um, Most people today get their news from social media and not from the big communication companies. And we look at that. And then not only does that, but we have people who, like yourself, or I can't remember the gentleman out of Houston that used to be on CNN that has, he's got his podcast. And so and they're giving uh, alternative information, alternative to the main liberal media, alternative to the main conservative media. And they give you stuff that you can chew on and think on. And they do have significant following. So it's encouraging that people are able to get the information that they choose to get, and they are getting meat a little closer to the bone, I would say.
I agree with you. So it kind of goes into the analysis by paralysis thing when you said there was only like a handful of stations back in the day. Now there's like it's not even TV anymore. It's just all over the place with the internet. The kind of the good side to that is you kind of get the stories that the bigger stations wouldn't have covered, as you kind of indicated, more at the local level as well. How do we go about, both from a leader perspective, the people that, do these sort of alternative media outlets and the people that consume them? How do we go about deciding what to listen to, who to watch, and how do we go about kind of leading that effort?
Well, again, that goes back to just human nature. Um, it's said that, within 12 feet and 12 seconds, when you encounter somebody if they're your type of person or not. If you're looking at something and it doesn't feel good, doesn't feel right, click, turn it off, go to something else. Find what suits you. And when we talk about, and not just finding what suits you, but what we're talking about is people being able to gain information, gain knowledge, and to grow. And that comes back to an accountability thing with the individual and a desire with the individual and an honesty with the individual. Do I want to grow? Do I want to be as much as I can possibly be? Or am I happy being in my cocoon? So people make those choices, and there are people that are happy in their cocoons, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there are people who pursue information and knowledge and want to expand their reach and let the the light of information pull them toward a greater light in themselves. So you can't be judgmental on people who make either choice, but those are the choices that you have, and you if you're a person that wants to gain, and this is not monetary, but just to be more informed, then you pursue those things that will inform you.
Now, you said not to be judgmental and not to push back, but like maybe offer a counter argument. Wouldn't that also mean that we let things stay the way they are right now? And isn't that the source of a lot of our consternation?
My immediate and visceral answer to that would be, "Oh, hell no. No. No.
Okay.
No." Uh, in life, in society, in nature, you have to grow. You have to advance or die. And if we want our society to die, do nothing. If we want to die, do nothing. Just do whatever is going on right now. Accept it just like it is, and it will die. Yeah, but if and this is the law of nature. This is not the law of me or my opinion. This is what it really is. And so movement, uh, moving forward, is the only way. Uh, we can't move backwards. And I know there's a popular slogan about "Make America Great Again." It does sound good. It does sound homey. It's a good marketing ploy, but we can't go back. There was in the era that they're talking about, and they say "Make America Great Again." It's post World War II. Maybe when the baby boomers were born, up until about 1960. At that time, a male, a Caucasian male, because everybody wasn't welcome to the club, could take a job as a school teacher, own a new car, have a secondhand car, have a wife, 2.5 kids, that's the two kids and the dog, live in a nice community, and afford to send their kids to any college they wanted to send their kids to, off of the income of being a public school teacher. What has happened since then? Well, when they started putting other people other than that demographic in, they said, well, we can get these people at less money. So let's put them in there. So we trickle down, we titrate down the revenue. And then they said, well, if we just get another gender in there, and they titrated down the revenue again. So they went to hire for cheaper labor to save on cost. And not that the expectation was different, but the people who were doing the job weren't being paid on that same level. So now we're at the point where if you're an educator, it's almost like a labor of love because you're sacrificing money. Um, and then the other thing it's not just in education, but this is in the economy. Post World War II, corporations were ecstatic to post profits 10 to 12%. And actually, back then, if you had a bank account, savings account, you might get 5% on that savings account, even six. That has changed. And now corporations and entities, they want to see, if they see lower than 30% profit, then there's going to be a change in leadership. So they want 30 to 35%. Anything above 30, you can keep your job. Below 30, you can't, but they want 35%. So what did they do? They took all of the resources and the wealth from the bottom end, lower wages, and shifted it up. So at the bottom end, you have less resources and less wages and less benefits. So they have more money at the top. And that is what we're living in. And this is the current environment that we are in. And that's one of the things why they rail against organized labor, because organized labor says, no, we need living wages down here. We need benefits to help us to live as human beings. And that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a third world labor force and just make a chasm that's so great that, people can't even dream or envision of being more than what they are.
How did that whole process start?
It,
I'm too young to remember when there were strong labor unions.
well, it started before it started, and it's always been here. It's just been greed. And there were people who were whose hand was on the steering wheel at the time they were convinced that, well, if we do this, we'll have more money at the top, and we're naturally going to be more generous with more money, and everything is going to work for everybody if you give people with money more money. That hasn't happened. And in fact, it was sort of codified in the 1980s as the trickle down. But it existed before then. The 80s, it had already been going on before the 80s. It probably even started in the 50s when they started hiring, other people. And when I say other, non-white males, people that were not males and that were non-white, and paying them less salary than they had previously paid the Caucasian males. And they saw that this is it was an accounting thing, a bean counter thing. Uh, more profits mean, I get a better bonus. And I don't care who I kick off the train. My objective is to get a better bonus.
I'm reading a book right now, and labor unions in the early part to the middle part of the 20th century were insanely strong to the point where they would literally wage war against corporatists. Um, how did we get to the point that we are right now, where we're essentially gaslit by politicians who want to convince us that trickle down economics works?
That goes to, again, human nature. Shiny thing, bright thing, ringing bells, smoke, misdirection. I'm. I will tell you, and this is what politicians will say, that, ooh, you want it better? Well, we're going to get it better. And the way we're going to get this better is to get those other people out of the way. And LBJ said this, if you make a person think that they're better than the next person, uh, you can pick their pockets. If you give a person somebody to look down on, they will empty their pockets for you. And that is what they employ otherism. And so I'm better than him, or I'm better than that, and I'm better than this. And so this otherism was a sort of mechanism that they used, and it caught fire in the unions, and the unions sort of ran with it. That it's the others, And if it just wasn't for the others, then we would be better. And it's an easy thing to buy into because if I am sitting in a trailer park and I'm smoking cigarettes and watching TV and, can't move around because of my health condition, and I want to use a defense mechanism of blaming, and you give me a picture of somebody that doesn't look like me, and I can say that it's my condition is their fault. I'm swallowing it hook, line, and sinker because you don't have any self responsibility. And so it's a popular thing, and the unions bought into it for the purposes of popularity. But it's saying it turned around and cut the throats.
So I'm hearing a different take, and I appreciate it. I like it. If I'm understanding you correctly, as Black people and Hispanic people and Asian people started to get more into the workforce, that was the root of the source of consternation. And you're also saying that unions played into that. Am I understanding that correctly?
What I'm saying is that what when they bought that into when the unions bought into the otherisms because it was popular, that made people think that the unions could do more, but for these other people who were in there. And so individuals who weren't the others wanted the others out and wanted the others not to be on par with them. But that the unions didn't consciously do that. The unions want numbers. And that was just a popular thing with unions. But beyond the unions, it had an impact across the board. Um, and it was something that happened in 1980 that was very popular in politics is where they started this thing with the well, Willie Hardin started later, but the welfare queen, and this is the welfare queen, and she's got welfare and she's got kids, and we're gonna oh well let's just not make them kids, but let's make them illegitimate kids so they don't have a father. And then let's have her driving a Cadillac and going to the store. And this is before food stamps. So they said you with a welfare check and buying food in her Cadillac. So that was just targeted otherism. And then we had the infamous Willie Hardin that had earned a furlough and then supposedly got out of jail and committed a crime. And so that's in the political lexicon right now. You Willie Harden somebody. They're soft on crime. Oh, you lose an election that way. So that otherism is proven effective, but it's not the truth, and it's really not being honest.
You keep mentioning human nature, um, how, things happen because of human nature. How do we counter that, and who's responsible for countering the source of darker sides of human nature?
The light of information and knowledge is an antiseptic to low information. And we have the same people, the same sources, the people um, have conditioned us to believe that education is on the level of distastefulness as having an STD. Ooh, you're educated. Ooh, you're a college boy. Ooh. Or you'll actually hear some clergy will say, and if I had money for every time I heard it, I'd be wealthy. You can have more degrees than are on a thermometer, but that won't get you into heaven. So this is conditioning people to not think that education and information and knowledge are valuable. And when they hear things, and they a political term you'll hear thrown around. It's been probably the last 10 years. The Harvard elites. Please. So, oh, he's a Harvard elite. Okay, yeah, right. Um, so it makes just the human nature again. I'm going back to human. The common man who's not doesn't consider himself a Harvard elite, doesn't consider himself informed. They buy into this, and it bristles the hair on the back of their neck when they hear somebody is coming with something that uh, it might make them better, but they're not going to like it. Uh, I think you're old enough to remember when Michelle Obama had the effort to have nutritional food in
Hmm.
school. And you'd have thought she was saying she wanted to poison kids. All she was saying was, let's have broccoli,
I remember.
let's have carrot. And, she got everything, called everything from a witch to whatever, because she wanted people to have nutrition that helped their bodies versus the Soylent Green that they had been passing off. That the only people that get help from that are the bottom line of the corporations that pass that stuff off as edible.
Now, one listening to this conversation might think that you are specifically mentioning the Republican Party. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I am not hearing that because I do remember Democrats or people that voted for Barack Obama also saying the same thing.
Mhm.
Are you talking about a specific party or a specific set of people here?
No, and that party thing is artificial. I have in my working with at the ballot board and working as an election judge, I have to work with people from the other party, the Republican Party. And yeah, I've met some people that I would not want to be around again. But I can say the same thing for some people who call themselves Democrats. And I'm not saying they're the same way as the Republicans, but they have their own set of things. They're like, okay, I will not work with you again. And I know some uh, people who you would think, because of their age and their race and all that, that I would be the last person that they would want to associate with. And there's a guy right now, and he lives in the Republican stronghold of town. Uh, he we communicate on a daily basis with love and care. Now, and he doesn't appreciate things that are going on, but that's because of his human value and not because of the party. So, I mean, I know we have parties, and it makes it easy to vote, but the Republican Party has bought into something, and both parties actually has bought into something, a bottom line that winning is the ultimate thing, and winning is not the ultimate thing. If you win and you're destroying our culture and our society, you have a Pyrrhic victory. You won, but you're destroying everything. So we always talk about what the kids have left. Oh, okay, what are we prepared? What are we doing? So let's really, and the war is between disequilibrium and equilibrium. Equilibrium is sustainable. Equal balance is sustainable. Disbalance and disequilibrium is not. And so anything that goes against not just the laws of nature, but the laws of being sustainable, that I'm like, why are we doing that? I'm not going to do that.
Now, you and I have had long conversations over the time we've known each other about electoral politics. As you just mentioned, both parties are focused on one thing, that's winning their elections, campaigns, rightfully so. I'm not going to knock them for that, versus a more holistic, sort of ground up approach where we instill knowledge, information, community engagement, community service into people. So, what is the best avenue to go about instilling that sort of service and information into people? Is it politics? Is it party? Is it some other channel?
I'm going to say, in one respect, it is education through education of our education process, because we don't have enough information given to us there and not given to us early enough to where it matters. And I understand that when I was in school, as a senior or as a junior, you got to take civics, and that taught you something. Well, they need to teach that at an earlier age, and it's not even part of the curriculum anymore. That's part of the process. And then the judicial system needs to step forward and say, hey, if this is this a distinct group of people and they are here, and that could be a precinct or a voting district, the courts are not going to allow you to divide that up to dilute their voting power. That's because then when people look left and right and they see people that look like them in their community, and that's the type of people that they elect from their community, then they feel more buy-in. And so those are a couple of things through the courts and through education, where people can feel they have more buy-in in the results. And then the legislature itself could play another part, but they're not going to do it because it's too lucrative for them. And I would make it is sort of draconian that the only people who get to visit with politicians on issues are their constituents and not lobbyists. Because in state capitals and down at City Hall and down at the county level, and that's certainly at the federal level, everybody talks about K Street in DC. You have these lobbyists that are paid lots of money, and they go and they wine and dine and pay for education in private schools to the elected officials, give vacations and retreats to these people. And so the people, as a favor to them, if it's not against the law, they will, okay, I can see your company's point of view. So we're gonna make it where you can do that. And that's against the public interest. And so I would have, if we can't make it outlaw lobbyists, I would have them not only register, but register their position and have to show every resource that they expend in the public interest, and make those resources, redirect those resources from the elected official to the constituency. Because as long as you're paid to play, people are going to make their pockets get fatter. It's greed. Um, what a first-time congressman, though they get, I'm just rounding numbers because it's easy, say $200,000, but they have a $10 million budget. And now they don't get to take home that $10 million budget, but they have appointments and this and that and other that they can do, that they sell and they trade. And they put that those funds go into their election campaign. So you have somebody that could effectively go into office and be in debt and come out with about $2 million after 1 2 year term in Congress, if they play it right. So that's attractive.
So if we take lobbyists, for example, if we want lobbyists out of government, or at least to register or what have you, what is the best way to do that? Is it to elect different leaders, or what's the best avenue to take there?
I am woefully inadequate to give you the best avenue. I can give you an opinion. And in my opinion, now lobbyists are already registered, but I would have every action that they do documented and publicized via social media so that we can pick it up on our phones, get an alert and pick it up on our phones and know what they're doing and why they're doing it. That would be the light of day information. And when we're informed of what's going on, we can make better decisions of what's going on. And also, I would not allow where lobbyists could just do, you know, here I'm. This is a $40,000 plane ride, private jet ride to Cancun that I'm giving, just sending you and your family on a junket to Cancun. Unless it is something that can be documented, that is documented before it happens, that benefits the constituents, I would make it impermissible. You want your kid to go to this six-figure a year private school? That's impermissible because where is that helping the constituents? So it has to pass the smell test of helping the constituents and not just helping the interest of the lobbyist or helping the politician. And that's what I would advocate.
Yep.
Now, how we bring that about,
Yeah. That's definitely a multi-year kind of effort for sure. All right. So we started off the conversation talking about Oak Cliff. What are you doing now? What's some of your work now, either in Oak Cliff or just generally in Dallas?
my work now is limited due to a physical ailment that I suffered in August. So my main thing is just recovery. I'm in a 5 months into a 12 month recovery, and that's going well. I am still active as a precinct chair, and I'm active as sort of a conduit to other people. I was actually on a cruise with my wife when the primaries were going on, and it was sort of like 0 dark 30. But it was with the interesting thing that occurred at that time that I was amused by was the reach outs that I got as a result of the election not going the way people thought it would. And those were people that were some people were inside politics and were working on things. And other people were just people who knew of me and called me and said, "How did you let this happen?" Or "How did that happen?" People didn't vote. And that is one of the things that if I could just wave a magic wand, I would have people do two things. One, to vote. And I don't care how you vote, just to vote. Because if people see you voting, that instills fear in them and they say, oh, if they're voting, they might vote a way that we don't want them to vote. So let's throw some crumbs out there and you can get some things just by registering to vote and to vote. The second thing that I would do with my little abracadabra wand is to have people vote in their own interest.
Mm,
If you know that it would benefit you and other people like you to have sick leave, vote for people that talk about that. If you know that it would benefit you and other people like you to have free Wi-Fi in parks or to have better parks, better libraries, better streets, walking trails, more reasonable pharmacies, pharmaceuticals, better healthcare. Vote for people that represent those interests. And it might not happen after just one election, but believe me, if there are people who are voting for those interests, those things will happen. And it let's say it doesn't happen on a national level. You could make it happen on a county or a city level. You can make it happen on a state level. Even if the entire state doesn't do it, you can have something that impacts you, but it does not happen when we have 2% of the people across the board voting. It does not happen when we have 10% of the people across the board voting. It happens when we get a significant amount of people, 35, 40% of people voting, and that instills fear. Another thing uh, that I would say would definitely impact us is to treat education as if it were a lifeboat that we need, whether we use it or not. Because when you take the census, one of the questions that they asked on the census, and this is the federal government, is your education level. And policy is based on what the census says. And if the education level of a tract or a zip code is 10, meaning less than high school, the resources that go to that census tract are not going to be the same as a census tract that has an education level that is ranked at 24. I don't care what you could, if you just get it and just sit on it. And because people, when you're in Texas and you're over 65, you get to go to school for free anyway. Can you imagine what the impact that would have on your grandkids seeing grandma and pawpaw go to school to get a degree? They're going to want to be like you because they love you. And they're going to do it at a younger age than you did. So we could take advantage of those things that are already there and influence the people that are behind us. And over the passage of time, change your zip code from a the census tract that has a 10th grade level of education to something, a census tract that has a postdoctoral level of education, and watch what the policies do to that they give to that level of education.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue into something that I promised you when I asked you if you could come on the podcast. Your thoughts on this most recent March primary elections.
Ah, I thought it reflected the will of the people that voted, and I thought it reflected the will of the people that were apathetic, that didn't take the time to vote. So it was it was on point in that respect. It doesn't say a lot about us as a society, and I'm including all parties, all genders, all races. And it doesn't say a lot about us as far as what our global, not global in the sense of international, but our overall expectations are with regards to how we can better govern. So it shows that we have a ways to go, and we can get there. But it's just as we've talked a while back. We just can't give up. We just can't quit because it's not a direct line, and just because it's not easy. And easy is overrated. Not to get ecclesiastic on you, but the Bible says that the road to damnation is broad and it's traveled by many. So those many people that don't vote and many people that don't care, and many people that don't engage, that's the road that we're going on. And we can choose better. We can do better.
All right. So I'm going to end it on three questions that I ask everybody. Since you live in Oak Cliff and since you're proud of your community, what is the best part about Oak Cliff, and what's the one thing that could be improved?
The best thing about Oak Cliff is its natural beauty. That is hands down the best thing about Oak Cliff. And that includes all of Oak Cliff south of I-30 from Kessler Park all the way out to the county line. Just natural beauty. That is the absolute best thing. What could be improved? We could have more public amenities to augment the beauty, more walking trails, more recreation centers, more and larger libraries. And I would even go as far as saying more recreational facilities like not just swimming pools, but I would go to things like having 5-acre crystal lagoons where people could go and be in a semi-resort type environment, because those things enhance people's quality of life. And lastly, without adding too much onto that, I would have more healthcare type things. Um, they do have what's called a Blewett Flowers Clinic, and that's fine. but I'd have a dozen of those. I wouldn't just have one and everybody in Oak Cliff go to that one. I'd have dozens of those where people could have access to healthcare. Because if it's easy to do, remember the easy thing, people will do what's easy. If it's tough to do, I'm gonna stay on my sofa and just die. I ain't trying to go through all that line now. Let's make it easy. But that's it.
All right. Where do you see Oak Cliff 10 years from now?
I see Oak Cliff 10 years from now headed into a gated community
Explain.
because people with resources, the people who currently occupy Kessler Park, people like those and people that have that type of resource are going to recognize they see the natural beauty of Oak Cliff and the quality that man can't give that they can have by living in a place with this topography and stuff like that. And they're going to bring those things to Oak Cliff. And because of the otherism, they're going to want to exclude other people. So that's where the gated community, I think it's going to, gated communities will come in.
Mm, interesting perspective. I'm not sure I've heard that before, but that's good to hear. Not good to hear, but good to have that perspective. All right, Mathis, is there anything that you wanted to share during this episode that you couldn't?
No, I have just not to, but I just have an overabiding love for people, period. Not just people that like me and people that I like, but just for people, period, and for life, period, for this country and for Texas and my community. And we could do better if we weren't sold on this thing of mine and yours and greed and stuff like that. And if we would just slow down a minute and just said, hey, let's breathe and how can we make this a win win for everybody? And it's possible. But now we're in a zero sum game where you get zero and I get some. And it's a fight to the death and everybody loses. So,
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Well, Mathis, again, appreciate you. Thank you for coming on to the show. Folks, this has been Chronicles of a Dallas County Democrat. Like, share, subscribe. We out.